Bonsoir, mes amis. I hope you're having a very good day today. Perhaps you have heard of the man who sold the Eiffel Tower not once, but twice. To understand how this came to be, we need to gain some insight of the atmosphere during World War One. A new kind of entrepreneur is stirring amongst us, the Times wrote in March of 1919. He is prone to the most detestable tactics, and is a stranger to charity and public spirit. One may note his acuity in separating others from their money. The First World War was a golden age for the underworld of crime. An inflamed sense of patriotism heightened levels of anxiety about personal survival. The chaos of the atmosphere created a unique opportunity for those who operated in the shadows. War is romanticized, especially World War One and World War Two. I know many men are interested in that era, and it is understandable. But in the romanticization of war, we rarely talk about all the dark things that arise and what it gives birth to. And people such as Victor Lustig and some others I will mention going on to here will give you some insight into the chaos that ensues once wars takes place or is underway. Arthur John Gregory was one of those men who quickly came to appreciate the unintended consequences of the war, a compulsive extortionist in the 1920s. In practice, he arranged payments to the ruling Liberal Party in exchange for peerages, published his own newspaper, and collected information about the sex lives of his political foes for the purpose of blackmailing or otherwise fleecing them. He cultivated the company of the deposed royals who haunted Europe in the post war years, once touching the exiled crown prince of Greece for a loan secured by the proceeds of a non existent Bolivian gold mine, and similarly interesting the Empress Maria, mother of the last Tsar, in a fanciful scheme involving breeding pigs for the purpose of mud wrestling contests against humans. That sounds pretty odd, breeding pigs in order to wrestle humans. But I suppose if you are a queen and you come from royalty, that doesn't sound too weird to you. Humans, especially peasants, wrestling with pigs. Yeah, that sounds like a plausible thing. But to me, I would find it a little odd as a normal everyday person. I'm curious. Do you find this odd? Put it down below. Or do you think that would be a cool thing to do? Anyways, I'm getting too carried away. Other people, such as Mabel Edith Scott, married the second Lord Russell in 1890, but went on to have a decade of bitter litigations against her estranged husband about his unusual and strange practices in the bedroom. In time, she went on to marry an individual describing himself as Arthurpold Stuart de Modena, an Austrian prince, who for some reason found himself living above a greengrocer's shop. In reality, the groom turned out to be a recently discharged naval raiding and sometime valet named Bill Brown, and Lady Russell was not his only wife. Then there was a Stephanie Otto who posed as a member of the Belgian royal family. Later, she ended up in jail after being convicted of obtaining 12 shillings and sixpence from a clergyman. The whole concept of the creative extraction of funds was one that was painfully familiar to a generation coming of age in the early years of the 20th century. Such was the, such was the range and variety of the scams that it sometimes seemed surprising that anyone could have emerged from the era with their wallet intact. I think in today's world, it's going to be a little bit digital, the digital scams that are going on. It's so much headache to just try to hold on to your digital wallet. So when Apple keeps testing me and Apple's like, hey, do you want to add on all your information onto your phone? I'm like, no, thank you, Apple. I don't need to have a digital wallet to make it easier for scams to come and get me. Appreciate it, but I'll keep some things physical. But I could see the convenience of having it. It's possible to generalize that a disillusioned world fed on war, self denial, and conformity was revolting against the diminished prospects in life it had long been forced to endure. People were materially and spiritually starved. For years, they had seen their ideals, illusions, and hopes worn away by the corrosive influence of events, by the horrors of the war and its aftermath. Scientific doctrines and, and psychological themes undermined people's religions and shook guardrails defining the boundaries of acceptable behavior. These were conditions that were favorable for the smooth talking type, the ones that thrive in times of chaos. Those sort of people understood emotional vulnerability, and volatile times was when most people were grateful to the stranger who shows up with an easy solution. Victor Lustig was one of those marginal figures who the police say had form. In fact, he epitomized the serial offender. By the age of 16, Lustig, while still at a state run boarding school in Dresden, already knew how to hustle older opponents at billiards, understood both how to lay odds at the local racehorse, and rapidly absent himself from the scene if the need arose. He was in familiar terms with what he called the incurable romantics, who loitered around doorways in the city center dressed in tight skirts and, to quote his subsequent arrest file, generally preferred the company of the louche and mutant types who sat drinking away the afternoon rather than the more conventional adolescent pursuits of his day. Lustig was a well learned man, could speak fluent German, Italian, Hungarian, French, and English. I can say, as a person whose second language is English, it is so difficult to learn even two languages. Like, it's impressive for three. But this man was fluent in five languages. Imagine how smart he is. Oftentimes, a bad guy is portrayed as being greedy, unsophisticated, and just really stupid in a way. It would appear that that is really rarely the case. That these people are very capable, they are very smart, but they don't want to play the game that society has foisted upon the everyday, well, all of us good, regular people, I suppose. But five languages is really quite impressive. He enjoyed watching opera and taught himself competitive level chess. He remarked in a letter he wrote from prison, "I have a consuming thirst for knowledge, and have always been able to find it one way or another." The author Floyd Miller later noted that the man who had gone on to become the quarry of police forces all over the world was the cleverest and most resourceful exploiter of human frailty in the history of crime. His first wife had this to say about him: "He could be terrible. His dark streak frightened even his friends. And he remembered, he never missed anything you said or did." Although Lustig had a sort of personal blacklist, his wife added. If, on the other hand, you were on his good side, he treated you like a brother. If you were his friend, nothing was too much trouble. He would only take from those who deserved it. His life's purpose was to rob the rich and help the needy. If you were on his white list, you could do no wrong. There was no gray list. He was incapable of gray. It was always either black or white. I must say, although I'm not a criminal, I'm not a lustig, I do fall in the category of black or white. In my youth, well, when I was like teenager years, I very much was a black or white for everything. Although now I see the world in the gray that it is, I'm able to see the world as the gray. I still categorize people in a black or white list. I don't have any hit list, but you're either my friend or you're not my friend. I do not deal with maybe friends. I am incapable of gray in that aspect. And I'm sure if you look at Lustig, you can see that maybe you have some qualities that are similar to his. And that is just so fascinating to know and give credit to the fact that we all have a little bit of a Lustig in us. And we are capable of great good or, great criminal activity if we wish to take that path. It is debatable how far Lustig's benevolence truly extended beyond himself and his immediate circle, but there's no doubt that he was one of those individuals who opted for a full-blooded approach to life rather than what he termed a timid but steady progress towards the grave. When such a character is both supremely intelligent and intensely ambitious, and he is, like Lustig, possesses a great zeal for separating people from their money, then the stage is set for an intoxicating performance. Lustig refused to dwell on his immigrant past, preferring to make up information about himself along the way. Consequently, he never went out of his way to correct misapprehensions regarding his real age or place of birth. Victor Lustig wasn't his real name. His parents christened him Robbie. A land tax assessment issued to their home in December of 1897 shows he was one of three children, living in a small family home in Bohemia. Given its location, it flitted back and forth between countries depending on the fortunes of war. In the late 19th century, the town was spread out around a number of bustling squares and a haphazard jumble of shops, bazaars, tenements, bungalows, bridges, and richly aromatic livestock pens. In 1893, the town is noted for its striking architectural contrasts, a glittering visual patisserie of soaring medieval spires and crude wooden shacks with animal swamps that bubbled and stank like stewing tripe. Gritty snow hillocks formed every winter along the unpaved streets, and sewage ran raw and braided in the gutters. Many of the town's adults were illiterate or semi literate at best. It was the kind of place that teaches a boy to be practical while it forces him to dream of better realities. It is in this sad and grim place that Lustig was born. Lustig's father, Ludwig, was a small, squat, cynically humorous man, known to be well groomed, proud of his dark mustache, responsible, and apparently honest, although we are told that he was gruff, bad tempered, and stingy. Ludwig had a way with women, a talent Victor would inherit from him, though he continuously tried to be as different from his father as possible. At the age of 8, he was told the novels of Emile Zola and his school were corrupting filth. He had to sign a solemn oath that he would abstain from alcohol and faithfully attend the Catholic Church. At a young age, his father forced him to take violin lessons, which he hated. Eventually, a clash of wills arose on the subject. Ludwig carefully raised the instrument and, with all his force, brought it down on the boy's head. Unsurprisingly, Victor never forgot the violin incident. For the rest of his life, authority figures would rarely evoke anything but contempt. Victor was considered bright but wayward as a child. He was resistant to the discipline of regular work and self willed, so much so that he got kicked out of school for telling the teacher to kiss his ass. There was something in the dark eyed youngster's look that set him apart from his schoolmates. We all liked him, but the teachers didn't. His friend Carl Herr wrote, he had guts. He could impersonate different people's voices, marching around the playground shouting mad army commands with a tin saucepan on his head. Somehow he seemed a lot wiser than us. At 13, he was tall and heavy-set, with an engaging smile that carried a glint of rebellion. Although Lustig seemed strong, he was sick a great deal, a reality he hid from his school friends. Migraines continuously plagued him, and his hands mysteriously swelled up in the summer months. Moral shortcoming is one part of the equation. Other poor qualities included vapidity, greed, and physical beauty. As a 14-year-old schoolboy, Lustig apparently once persuaded a village girl of his own age to accompany him back to his empty family home, where he made love to her on the floor in front of a large antique mirror propped up against the wall. Immediately afterwards, he found that he wanted to be alone. "I've got to run," he announced. Lustig seemed to not have understood how cutting his remark was, or that leaving so abruptly might have hurt someone's feelings, because he reportedly said the same thing to a number of subsequent partners. Indeed, it became a catchphrase for him in life. It is written, at the age of 14, Lustig ran away from home and found himself living 700 miles away in Paris. Lodged in various quarters, he found shelter in a house of prostitution. Eventually, the police found him and returned him to his father. Soon after, his father sent him to a subsidized boarding school 150 miles away. Boarding school, however, was not going to keep him from his extracurricular activities. Once on a warm spring night, while scavenging for food outside the kitchen door of a fashionable hotel, he saw an attractive young woman walk by. To me, she was a fairy princess, he recalled. She was with a man much older than her. I saw the waiter come and take their order. My mouth began to water, because all I'd had to eat for days had come out of garbage cans. No sooner had the couple sat down, however, than the man pulled out a thick bankroll and passed it to the woman. The two of them promptly stood up and left their table without eating, presumably without eating, presumably to carry out their evening in more intimate surroundings. Neither party had bothered to glance at the vagrant schoolboy loitering by the back door. Psychologically, the importance of this incident, which Lustig could still vividly recall in middle age, lies in two things. The first is that what I saw that night shattered my faith in women forever. To him, they now became commodities to be bought and sold like everything else. As a poverty stricken kid, Lustig wrote, I had always looked on the fairer sex as goddesses. No more. The second important result was that it helped provide the intellectual underpinning for a life devoted almost exclusively to crime. Even in 1945, in the squalor of an American maximum security prison cell, Lustig was unable to fully turn his back on the ideology that had shaped his whole career. The man and the woman both got up without touching a morsel of that delicious food. At that moment, I resolved that there were those among us who didn't deserve their wealth, and that my purpose on earth was to address this. I think we've all had our moments at times. A little bit of Victor Lustig in us, at least I can say for me. There are moments where I'm like, there are those in life who do not deserve the good things that they have. But I think a decent amount of us usually, you know, think about it, we calm down, and we're like, life's unfair, and that's just it. We don't go about trying to separate people from their money. Unless, of course, you're the government, which in that case, by all means, separate people from their money any which way. Oh, so I suppose be a lustig or join the government? Mm, this is me. This is me being running away with the storyline. But overall, very interesting to get into this understanding of this man. I think the anti hero is now in. We're out with heroes, in with anti heroes. And Lustig, I would categorize kind of as an anti hero. Because he truly did only go after people who deserved it for the most part. People who were doing things that were wrong or already a little bit, on the fence themselves. And he does, even though he's a criminal, the same thing I said about, Bill Hickok when we covered him. There's a streak of goodness in him. He has his bads, but he's a charmer. He's good with women. He's respectful. Every time he got arrested, the police, he would be so polite, so respectful, such a gentleman. So it is, people are capable. The duplicity is, that is possible. To have someone who is a criminal and able to fleece people, but also be kind, be a gentleman, and treat people very, um, appropriately or act in a gentleman fashion. Thank you for hanging out with me and listening to the first part of Victor Lustig. So for now, I will say au revoir and I will talk to you next time.